Hello everybody, welcome to Retro Game Super Leagues. I'm Brian, also known as UKGN Zoidberg, and in this video we're going to be ranking all of the golf games that came out on the Amiga. This list is being produced in conjunction with the re-review that I did last Friday on the game Microprose Golf. So if you want to see what I thought of that game in more depth, then go back and watch that video. Otherwise, stick around and we're going to go through all 20 golf games that I have played. Okay, so same business as usual. We've got 20 games to go through on this Super League, and I'm going to be ranking them in one of the 5 categories that you can see before you. Essential, recommended, good, poor, or rubbish. Like we do all every time, and because we're doing golf games, I thought I'd make it a nice shade of green for this video. So we're going to kick off this list with Challenge Golf, which came out in 1991 from publisher Online Entertainment. And basically we're starting this list off with a game that's incredibly basic in terms of both how it looks and how it plays. And probably the most noteworthy thing about it is the fact that it's all played out in a deathly silence. Apart from a piece of music that plays on the title screen, there is no sound whatsoever. And that just makes it incredibly dull to play. This game came out in 1991 and just about hit the standard of the other games that had come before it. But unfortunately, there were other games that came out the same year that raised the standard. So there's nowhere else I can put this other than the poor category. Second game on the list is Greg Norman's Ultimate Golf, which came out in 1990, published by Gremlin Graphics. This game was actually subtitled Shark Attack, which if you didn't know what Greg Norman's nickname was in real life might confuse you. This one featured some 3D graphics that were actually quite impressive for 1990, even though they didn't actually move. Sadly though, it plays really poorly. I found that it was almost impossible to take a shot, and I tried all kinds of different timing and none of it seemed to work. On those occasions that I did manage to hit a ball, replicating the timing for the next shot didn't do anything at all, and that unfortunately sinks it into the poor category as well. I would actually rather play Challenge Golf. Next up we have the most recent game on the list, although you wouldn't know that to look at it. This is International Golf from publisher Summit. It has all the look and feel of a public domain game, and due to lack of sales it actually ended up being released as licenseware in 1996, so you can download it for free most places on the internet. Despite how it looks though, it is actually quite enjoyable to play, and there's not that many other games on the list that play like it. All the direction, power and shot type options you can set at your leisure, meaning that when you actually take the shot, all you have to worry about is the timing. To be honest, it works better than I've probably made it sound. But it's definitely worth playing, and I'm going to stick it in the good category, so that's where it's going. Next up we have 2 games that were endorsed by Jack Nicklaus and published by Accolade. The first one, Jack Nicklaus's Greatest 18 Holes of Major Championship Golf, has probably the best title on this entire list. And let's face it, the idea of hiring a golf pro to put his name to your game and then asking him to choose their favourite 18 holes from around the world to make one single golf course is a fantastic one. If it was done today, this would probably either be DLC or a timed event for a modern game. It's playable enough with a power bar system that works reasonably well. But the reason why I'm going to put it in the good category is because of what came next, and I'm actually going to place it below International Golf. So next up is Jack Nicklaus's Ultimate Golf, which is once again published by Accolade, and this came out 2 years later. Basically, take everything that I just said about the previous game and imagine that everything is the same, but much improved. The menu screens are laid out identically, you aim and take shots in exactly the same way, but it's all far more responsive and the graphics are vastly improved. Although for some reason they didn't change the look of the actual golfer. The extra 2 years in development was clearly a long time. Don't even bother playing the first one, just play this one instead, and I'm going to stick it. This is going to be the first game that I would recommend. Next up is the Amiga version of Leaderboard, which came out in 1986 and was converted to the Amiga by Sculptured Software, same people who made Jack Nicklaus's Ultimate Golf. The Spectrum version of Leaderboard is actually the first golf game that I really enjoyed playing, and I don't think it's controversial to say that the Amiga version isn't as good. I think that the fact that everything was surrounded by water in the 8-bit versions was actually all part of the appeal, and playing on more traditional golf courses is a lot less interesting. The graphics are quite muddled at times, but the shot interface still works as well as ever, offering the right amount of challenge. So that means it's not going to go in the poor category. I'm going to stick this in good. Would I put it above any of the games that are in there? Yes, I'm going to put this at the top of the good category. Next up, we have Lynx, which came to the Amiga in 1992. And there's no denying that this game offers a pretty decent round of golf. And the PC version was certainly very highly thought of at the time. Sadly, it's clearly been designed for more powerful machines than the Amiga, as everything here is just so slow. The loading times are excruciatingly long, and every time you try to turn your view, you have to wait about 3 or 4 seconds while it resets the camera. The graphics are a little messy, but aiming and taking your shots is impressively simple, and there's a driving range that you can visit to practice. There are better games available than this one, but there are also a lot worse ones, so I'm going to stick this in good as well. I'm going to put it just above leaderboard. Next up, we have another game from 1986. This is Mean 18, which was also published by Accolade. And the main thing that this game has going for it is the sheer number of courses that it has in it. The game disc itself has got 4 on it, and there are 4 more data discs with 4 on each that are also available. On top of that, there's also a course architect mode, as the game calls it, where you can edit and create your own. Visually, it's a bit basic, which is to be expected from a game from 1986, but there are some very strange colour choices in places. It does play a decent round of golf though, and is definitely worth playing, so I'm going to put this in good as well, but right down at the bottom below the Jack Nicklaus one. Next up is Microprose Golf, which is the game that I covered on the re-review last week. So if you watched that video, you know exactly how I feel about this one. It's a fantastic game. It's got lots of options, lots of different ways to play, full career mode, and the controls when you're actually playing the game are incredibly simple, and it all looks great, especially if you're playing it on the A500 Mini. There's no place where this is going to go other than the Essential. Next up, we have Mini Golf Plus, which came out in 1988 and was from Starbite Software. It's a really basic looking mini golf game with an admittedly good control method, but some incredibly dodgy physics. I found some of the holes were impossible due to the ball behaving so erratically, and it only features 18 holes in total, so it might be enjoyable for a single game against your friends, but you're not going to remember it or come back to it again. There's also a really annoying piece of music that plays on loop the entire time that you're playing it, and it doesn't fit the game at all. I'm going to stick this in the poor category, above Greg Norman. Now next is a game that's actually going to take up 2 positions on this countdown. This is Nick Faldo's Championship Golf, or the original version of which came out in 1992 and was developed by Arc Developments. This is essentially a game that Grand Slam decided to release twice. It stood out at the time with its full screen graphics and excellent training mode. There are only 2 courses to play, and it can feel a little bit slow at times, but I also found the control interface to be overly tricky to use, but it is a decent game overall. However, Nick Faldo's Golf for the CD32 came out 2 years later from developer Images, and they basically refined everything about the game and made it even better. It makes full use of the extra colours on offer to create lush looking fairways and greens, and you can fortunately still put away the joypad and play it with the mouse instead. Out of the 2 games, the CD32 version is clearly the better one, that's why it's going in the Essential category, but below Microprose Golf, with the original going at the top of the recommended category. Next up is PGA Tour Golf from Electronic Arts, released in 1991. And when I said earlier in this video about Challenge Golf coming out at the same time as something else that raised the bar, I was talking about this game, as there's simply no comparison between the 2. This is a slick, playable and immensely fun golf game. It's easy to see why EA's series became the golf game for so many years. The presentation is excellent, with a nice use of 3D to show off the holes before each one. Even though this one is incorrectly credited as the game that introduced the 3-click control method, this is probably the one that perfected it. And I'm going to stick this at the top of the recommended category. Next up is PGA European Tour, which came out in 1994, and this is the reason why the last game didn't go in the essential category. This has possibly the most user-friendly interface of any game on this list. Changing your clubs and aiming the shots is incredibly simple, allowing you to concentrate on just getting a good score instead. The graphics are excellent, very, very smooth and well presented across the board, although I do miss the 3D flyover that the first game had. It's easy to see why many people consider this to be the best golf game on the Amiga. However, for me personally, I think Microprose Golf is better. Still going in the essential category though. Next up is Ryder Cup Johnny Walker, which came out in 1993 and is actually one of two golf games that came out that year from Ocean Software. The other one, International Open Golf, I've not been able to find a working copy of prior to doing this list, so that's why it's not included here. But basically, they're essentially the same game. Although with this one, because it's based on the Ryder Cup, you get to take part in the greatest team competition known to golf. But apart from that, there's not a lot that makes it memorable. The presentation isn't very good, with blurry digitized photos behind the menu screens and a scruffy looking combination of shaders and colours in the main game itself. The ball movement in particular looks really rubbish. Sometimes it's even impossible to tell where your ball is actually going. I must say that it is nice that the developers included 3 different control methods for you to try and use, although none of them are actually very good. I'm going to stick this at the top of the poor section because it doesn't play very well at all. Next up is Sensible Golf, which is probably the most disappointing game on this entire list. Because on paper, the idea of a golf game using the same graphical style that Sensible had become well known for with Cannon Fodder and Sensible Soccer was a brilliant one. But something went wrong in the execution. It plays well enough and the graphics are as good as you would expect from the developer. I especially like the look of the golfers when you zoom in on the putting green, but it's ultimately lacking that fun factor that you would expect from the developer. Maybe at the end of the day there was ultimately too much sensible, with a small s, and not enough silly. So I'm going to stick this in the good category, but just below Links. Next up we have Tournament Golf from Elite, which is making its second appearance on the Retro Game Super League. And that's because it's based on a Sega arcade game. And that means that it features big, good-looking sprites, but that's about all it has going for it. While there's nothing here that's particularly terrible, you just end up with a game that's painfully average. And there's nowhere else that I can put it other than the bottom of the good category. I'm going to put it above Mean 18. Next up, we have World Class Leaderboard, which I said in my original Microprose Golf review had been my previous favourite golf game of all time. Let's get one thing straight here, that was not the Amiga version. Everything that I said earlier about the original leaderboard applies to this sequel as well, although the visuals are much improved. It's just as playable as ever with a good number of courses to play, although this Amiga version is really starting to show its age. Occasionally the lie of the ball won't affect your shots in the way that you expect, and ultimately it's all a little bit flat as there's no hills anywhere, but especially the greens, and that stops it from being a game that I can recommend. So this is also going to go in the good category, but I'm going to put it above the original leaderboard and below Sensible Golf. Next up we have World Tour Golf from 1988, which was published by EA, and this is essentially what EA did before they made the PGA Tour Golf series. And for that reason alone, it deserves its place in gaming history. If, however, you're wanting to play it for any other reason other than curiosity, don't. This is clearly from a time when developers were trying to work out how to make a golf game, and this is one experiment that just didn't work. It's bad to look at and unplayable, and as such, it is going straight into the rubbish category. And so for the final game on this list, we have Zany Golf, which, as the title suggests, is not a serious golf game. This is a mini golf game with some great isometric visuals and an easy to grasp control system. But unfortunately, it's all let down by the way that it limits the number of shots that the player is allowed to use. When you get a game over message because of something that's not your fault, that's always annoying, and it makes for a game that you're never going to want to play for long periods. If you draft in 3 friends to play it with you, then you will get some enjoyment out of it, and for that reason alone it's going in good. But I can't put it anywhere towards the top of the good category. I'm going to put it above tournament golf. So there you have it. That's all 20 golf games on the Amiga ranked. Obviously, this is purely my opinion and nobody else's. And if you disagree with any of the placements that you see here, then please do let me know in the comments where you'd have placed the games and which ones are your favourites. I'm going to be back next week with the first of our Halloween-themed re-reviews that we've got for the month of October. So thank you very much for watching. Until next time, happy retro gaming. I'll see you soon.